Devils are an aspect of Dungeons & Dragons that has been used on and off since the release of the Monster Manual in 1977. In the previous video of this duology, we discussed Hell and the Devils as represented within the game, including an overview on their diabolic history as it has unfolded over the various editions of Dungeons & Dragons. In the second part, I'll be looking at the real world, whatever that means when talking about the supernatural and related subjects, at the beings that inspired the devils in Dungeons & Dragons, where their names alone or also by their natures. Because some viewers may find what follows a sensitive subject, particularly if certain religious beliefs are held, please take this as a content warning and urge to proceed with caution. It is not my intent to offend. And as Dante puts it, abandon all hope, ye who enter, and let's delve into some diabolic origins. In the first part, my sources were obviously D&D related. Some folks noticed that I hadn't included the Judges Guild Inferno on that list. That was on purpose. Simple fact, Inferno is not based on the Dungeons & Dragons depiction of hell and its inhabitants, but on the first part of Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, after which the Judges Guild module is named. So, that being said, Dante's Inferno is one of the sources for this video, along with John Milton's Paradise Lost, which covers the two great depictions of hell within fictional works. Alongside these, some less so fictional works, depending on where your standpoint on the subject is: Moncure de Conway's Demonology and Devil Lore, Gustav Davidson's A Dictionary of Angels, including the Fallen Angels, the glorious Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, in this case the 20th edition of the work from 2018, and Fred Getting's Dictionary of Demons, which forms the spine of this video essay. All of these works branch off into various other works: Abrahamic religious texts, grimoires such as the Key of Solomon, the Malleus Maleficarium, several works of legend and mythology such as Gilgamesh, and so on. I'll attempt to provide references where necessary and possible, but the subject has, by means of Dungeons & Dragons and its mishmash amalgamation with mythologies, been formed into such a spider's web that it might not be possible at every turn. Still, if you start with Gettings and pair it with Brewers, you're already onto a reasonably clear path, and so that's my baseline. By the way, I will likely do videos regarding both of those works, Brewers and Gettings, at a later point, as they form such good sources for people interested in myths and legends and monsters and demons and devils and such forth. Let's start with hell itself, and work our way out from there. The whole concept of hell is founded on the ethics, even if it's something so simple as, if you do not behave correctly, you will go to hell. Philosophically, ethics can be broken down into core definitions of what behaving correctly actually means. One of the primary examiners of this is Aristotle, particularly within the Nicomachean Ethics, wherein the concept of defining the best of human life is explored. This gives rise to several positive traits and their reverse, the positive traits being later drawn from to represent the virtues, and their reverses being the source of the deadly sins. Dante, in Inferno, draws from Aristotle and later works, including Christian symbology, to create his concentric 9 circles of hell, each dedicated to a particular form of sin and its appropriate punishment. Within Dante's hell, the circles are defined as: the first, Limbo, the circle of the unbaptized and pagans that have otherwise lived virtuous lives, broadly a very Christian-centric circle holding those who never knew Christ. Here flows the river of blood, the Phlegethon, which also flows down into the third ring of the 7th circle. Second is Lust, the circle of those who could not control their carnal natures. Third is Gluttony, home of the overindulgers. Fourth, Greed, the home of Pluto, the Roman Hades, which gives us the first indication of the mixture of sources that Dante used. Here, those who hoarded or wasted their coin. I can think of a few billionaires that might end up here. Fifth, Anger or Wrath, There, the swamps and waters of the river Styx form a moat around the walls of the city of Dis, which encompasses the 6th through the 9th circles. Those with open hatred and anger float on top of the morass, taking their anger out on each other. Those with more deep-set inner hatreds exist further into the depths of the waters. 6th, heresy. Home of the heretics, including atheists, so high, I guess, where they eternally burn. 7th, violence, which has divided itself into 3 rings. Violence against relatives, with its inhabitants immersed in the burning waters of the Phlegethus. Violence against self, the pathless wood. And violence against God, art and nature, the desert of burning sands. The latter ring is split into those 3 elements: the blasphemers against God, the usurers against art, and the sodomites against nature. 8th is fraud. At the great cliff or chasm from the 7th circle to the 8th, Dante meets Gerion, the monster of fraud, and, with Virgil, they persuade the creature to fly them down to the 8th circle itself. This circle carries a name, Malabolg, which comprises 10 ditches around a central well. Each of the ditches, the Bolgia, hold particular types of fraudulent sinners. The first, panderers and seducers. The second, flatterers. The third, simoniacs, those who sell ecclesiastical favours and offices. The fourth, sorcerers, including astrologers, diviners, fortune-tellers, and so on. Note to all your local spiritualists. The 5th, barrators, corrupt politicians. The 6th, hypocrites. The 7th, thieves. The 8th, fraudulent counsellors. The 9th, sowers of discord. The 10th, alchemists, impostors, counterfeiters and perjurers, falsifiers, respectively, of things, persons, money and words. And finally, the central well, that is guarded by giants, held as symbols of treachery: Nimrod, Ephialtes, Otus, Briareus, Titius, Typhon and Antaeus, the latter being persuaded by Virgil to lower the travellers within hell down into the 9th circle. The 9th circle itself, treachery, where sits the frozen lake of the Cocytus, in which various traitors are trapped. The lake is divided into 4 rounds, within which traitors of different types are held. The first round, Cana, named after Cain, holds traitors to their kin. Second is Antenora, holding traitors to their country. The third, Ptolemaea, holding traitors to guests. The final round, Judeca, named after Judas Iscariot, holds traitors to their lords. Beyond this round lies the centre of Cocytus and hell, where Satan, the fallen angel Lucifer, is held within the ice. So how does this compare to the hell of D&D? Well, there are a few touch points in there. The first circle, Limbo, is paralleled by the first layer, Avernus. But Limbo is the chaotic neutral plane in the D&D cosmology rather than the first layer of the Hells. Avernus comes from a lake near Puteoli in Italy, modern-day Pozzuoli near Naples. This lake is a volcanic crater and was said to be an entrance to Hades. Both Aeneas, in Virgil's Aeneid, and Odysseus, in Hyginus's Fabulae, descend into the underworld from this place. It is likely that the area was still volcanic in ancient times, as the etymology of Puteoli links to the Latin to stink, and the etymology of Avernus links to the Greek for no birds. Apparently birds flying over the lake would drop dead, probably from sulphur poisoning. In Greek tradition, the Acheron is a river associated with the underworld, along with the Cocytus, the Styx, the Phlegethon, and the Lethe. Layer 2 is Dis in D&D, but we don't come across Dis in Inferno until its iron city walls from the boundary between the circles 5 and 6. However, its place as an iron city is common to both. Dis is also an alternative name for Pluto, aka Hades, as in the god, usually found within Roman poetry. Layer 3, Menauros in D&D, and here we have a reasonable link in influence for Mammon, the diabolic patriarch of greed in D&D, also having a connection to greed within real-world definitions. Note, greed, not gluttony, so D&D is one plane displaced in comparison to Dante here. We'll deal with Mammon's origins and all of that when we look at the rest of the devils, but while we're looking at layer and circle names, let's look at Menauros. While I can't find any specific reference to Menauros beyond D&D sources, we can break down the etymology of the word itself. Latin auros translates to gold, and min comes from mino, meaning less, or mina, meaning threat. To give us a name that either means less gold, which would be an irony, or the threat of gold, or similar, perhaps evil gold, which would tie into Mammon's nature. On to layer 4. Here, Phlegethus, probably named for the Phlegethon river that Dante has flowing from Circle 1 to Circle 7. Either way, Belial and Philemon are more representative of lust, as in the second circle, than greed, which suits Mammon more. So there's a departure again here between D&D and Dante, which is okay. Gygax and the other architects of D&D's planes took influences from several sources, so we're not expecting things to match up at every turn. Or any turn. On to 5, Stygia in D&D, and the swampy circle of the wrathful in Dante. This matches quite well. D&D's Stygia is a frozen swamp. Our friend Gorion shows up later in Dante from the 7th to the 8th circles. Levistus and his ice-trapped form echoes the fates of the traitors in Dante, trapped within the ice of Cocytus. As for the name, Stygia, this is in reference to the river Styx, with things associated with the Styx being Stygian. This term is also used as a descriptor for hell, underground places, and hell-like places, Stygian depths, Stygian plains, and so on. 6 is Malabolg, the name Dante gives to the 8th circle. Its etymology is Italian and translates to evil ditches, hence its composition of ditches, the Bolgia, within Inferno. Perhaps Malabolg in D&D, being an infinite mountainside, references this. It certainly echoes the Great Cliff, which divides the 7th and 8th circles. Its later incarnation, as the consuming wasteland formed from Malagard, denies both the etymology of the name and the general inspiration of Dante. 7 is Maladomini in D&D, and the 3 rings of violence in Dante. Not really much in the way of correlation here. The name from Latin translates to evil lord, a role which Beelzebul can certainly fulfill. The name doesn't come from anywhere specific. Cana is D&D's 8th layer, on Dante's name for the first round of the 9th circle. As previously noted, its name is derived from Cain, the first kinslayer in biblical tradition, and thus a fitting personage to invoke for the place dedicated to traitors to kin. Its frozen nature parallels Dante's definition as one of the rounds of the 9th circle that are locked in the frozen lake of Cocytus. Finally, the 9th layer, Nessus, is a broken landscape of fissures, totally unlike Dante's 9th layer, encompassing the frozen waters of Cocytus. In D&D, Cocytus is the name given to a layer of pandemonium, as is Phlegethon, so perhaps the infernal rivers were the primary source used for the layers of the planes of chaotic neutral evils. What is similar here is that the ruler of hell, Satan, in Dante, Asmodeus in D&D, is trapped at its lowest point. Physically, for both personages are able to otherwise send influence into mortal realms in one way or another. Satan is locked in the ice of Cocytus. Asmodeus, in his serpent form, is coiled in the deepest pit of the hells. Within D&D's version of the 9th layer, the river Lethe ambles across the layer, rather than being usurped for a pandemonic layer or such. As for the name of the place, Nessus refers to a centaur from Greek mythology. He operated a ferry on the river Evenus. When transporting Deianira, wife of Heracles, he attempted to assault her. Heracles, true to his usual modus operandi, killed the centaur, but after he died, Nessus urged Deianira to collect his blood, telling her that giving Heracles a shirt smeared with the stuff would ensure his love for her. Later, when Deianira feared that Heracles was falling for Iole, she gave him the tunic smeared with Nessus's blood, which, being poisoned, killed Heracles. Nessus's name, thus, going down for posterity as a tunic or shirt of Nessus, referencing a misfortune that cannot be escaped. Given that D&D's Nessus is both the seat of rulership and the prison for Hell's ultimate ruler, it's a fitting name. Now we've explored Hell and touched on some of its features, let's have a look at some of the inhabitants of the place. Again, starting from a D&D-centric view and delving into the mythological origin. The easiest place to start, I feel, is to look at the fallen angels. Within Abrahamic religions, a fallen angel is an angel who has sinned, the greatest of those sins, from an angelic perspective, being rebelling against God. The Book of Enoch lists a core group of these beings, and a number of additional sources fill out the list. Davidson's A Dictionary of Angels provides a convenient composite list, so that is my starting point from which we will branch. So first off, let's consider those D&D archdevils that are also identified as fallen angels from a real-world source, setting aside any dukes or lesser-named devils from D&D lore for now. So in alphabetical order, Asmodeus, once the angel Samael, and a seraphim. He is equated with Satan and an angel of death, once ruler of the fifth heaven outside of D&D terms. After falling, the name Asmodeus is taken, which derives from Esmadiva, a Persian demon said to lead men into acts of cruelty and destruction. It seems that Asmodeus thus began life within Persian mythology and transitions to Abrahamic mythology, being associated with Samael by some sources along the way, notably the Michaelius hierarchy, which associates him with the seraphim. In most sources, the highest order of angels, from St. Ambrose, seraphim, cherubim, dominations, thrones, principalities, potentates or powers, virtues, archangels, and then finally, just angels. All in all, a pretty important devil all round, and a fitting model for the ruler of D&D's Hell. Next up, Baalzebul, or alternatively Beelzebub, Beelzebul, and so on. Interestingly, using Beelzebul, meaning God of Heaven, and corrupting it to Beelzebub, God of the Dunghill, leads to the ancient concept of the Lord of the Flies, an epithet Baalzebul is known by in D&D and within real-world documents. Beelzebul probably originated as a Syrian god, later demonized as a fallen angel, seraphim or cherubim, and associated with the Lord of the Flies concept in Judeo-Christian lore. He is sometimes noted as being the king of hell, and sometimes second in power within hell to Satan. So his general high pecking order within the game representation works in reference. Belial, or Beliar, from the Hebrew worthless one. In some sources, Belial is equated to one of the faces of Satan, but also as a fallen virtue, associated with licentiousness and also sloth. That suits his persona as provided within D&D. Beyond that, his description within the Key of Solomon identifies him as a king amongst demons, of beautiful aspect and fair of speech, again pretty much matching his game counterpart. Mammon comes from a Syrian term for riches. He enters into Christianity through the words of Christ in Matthew 6:24, "You cannot serve God and mammon." From there, wending his way into medieval grimoires and other works on demonology, as a devil fond of stashing the cash. He is handed down as a demon of avarice and materialism. Interestingly, Duplancy places Mammon as Hell's ambassador to England, so perhaps he or one of his minions will be charged with escorting me to the Sixth Circle when the time comes. Mephistopheles' name, in Hebrew, translates to something like the destroying liar, but also from a medieval construct within Greek meaning not loving light. Mephistopheles is the representative of Lucifer or Satan in the Faust mythologies. While there are some attempts to connect him to older mythology, it seems that he is a relatively modern introduction, given the broad scope of chronology within which we are working. Moloch, or Molech, is one of the first extra-biblical mythological figures associated with demonology that I ever learned about. In Hebrew, his name simply means king. According to 1 Kings 2:7, Moloch was one of the gods of the Ammonites who lived in the vicinity of Rabbath Ammon, the modern city of Amman, capital of Jordan. Moloch was demonised and often depicted as an ox-headed oven made of brass into which children would be sacrificed by burning. This makes it into later accounts, associating Moloch with the child sacrifices found at Carthage, the depiction of the Cretan Minotaur, and synonyms for that which requires sacrifice. 1 Kings and Leviticus make several references to Moloch, generally in reference to similarly demonising worship of sacrificing to him. There is an element of "thou protest too much" about this, however, and I'm more inclined to believe much of the biblical entries are intended to demonise a rival deity in order to displace him. It's also interesting to note that the passages referring to Moloch often recognise him as a god in antithesis to the Judeo-Christian God, rather than a false god under the one true God recitation of Judeo-Christianity. Next up, anyway, those archdevils that are not covered as fallen angels. So Dis, or Dispater, is another name for Pluto, who is the equivalent to the Greek god Hades, and indeed the ruler of the underworld realm of Hades in both Greek and Roman mythology. Within D&D, Hades is the neutral evil plane, named later as the Grey Waste. Of course, as we've already discussed, Dis is also the name of the iron-walled city that surrounds the 6th through 9th circles of Dante's Hell, and the Iron City on the second layer of Hell, ruled by Dispater in D&D. In Latin, dis can mean possessing wealth, and pater means simply father, so dis pater becomes father who possesses wealth. Ditis patris and dis pater, split into 2 words, was at one time an underworld god of mineral wealth and fertile land, before later becoming identified with other chthonic, that is, underworld or under-earth gods, such as Pluto and Orcus. We'll save Orcus for another video on demons in Dungeons & Dragons and their origins. Fianna means fierce in Latin, but otherwise this diabolic woman doesn't appear within any sources I have outside the game. Fierce seems to suit her character well enough, though. Gorion is a 3-bodied, monstrous, 3-handed, headed, or, in combination, giant, known for possessing a herd of oxen fed on the flesh of humans. Heracles slew this giant with a Hydra blood-poisoned arrow, along with Orthos, the giant's 2-headed watchdog, as part of his mission to retrieve the oxen, one of his 12 famous tasks. Within Dante, Gorion retains his triple nature, being a chimeric monstrous cross between wyvern, lion and man. He represents fraud, and accordingly inhabits the 8th circle, to which Virgil persuades the beast to carry he and Dante down from the 7th circle and the Great Cliff. Glasia, rather than being a princess of hell and daughter of Asmodeus, we can find amongst the Enochian demons, spirits associated with the apocryphal Book of Enoch, a work estimated to date as far back as 300 BCE. Here, Glasia is a name for the demon Glasialabolas, who is also known by the name as Glacia Labolas, Carcrinolas, and Cassimola. He, rather than she, is depicted as a winged dog and is invoked within the themes of murder, invisibility, science, and scrying of past and future. Levistus doesn't appear in any source I can find, but we can break down his name somewhat. The suffix "us" is often used to Latinise names, so we can look at levist for a root meaning. In Latin, this translates to lifted. Perhaps we can read into his name, then, an indicator of his elevated status by Asmodeus, returned to the ranks of the archdevils to displace Gorion. In any case, the name seems to be invented for the game, and though his form echoes those traitors trapped within the frozen waters of Cocytus within the 9th circle, fitting given the archdevil's D&D backstory of treachery. Malagard is another game-invented name as far as I can tell. Her name is relatively easy to break apart, Mala being evil and Guard simply guard, so evil guard. I'm not sure that translation particularly connects with the concept of the Hag Countess, but perhaps, given what happened to her, that's all she was doing for Asmodeus, guarding the evil of Malbolg until such time as the ultimate power within the Hells needed her no longer. Tiamat's origin, every Dungeons & Dragons player should know by now. I mean, my grief does she get around. She begins in Mesopotamian mythology as the bitter waters, the primordial sea and sometimes element of chaos that mates, or rather mingles, with Apsu, the sweet waters, giving rise to creation of the world and or of the Babylonian gods. Once Apsu is slain, she takes the vengeance on the gods, becoming an almost parallel to the Greek Echidna, the mother of monsters, before being slain by the god Marduk. Her remains are then used to construct the cosmos. From Babylon, Tiamat is possibly cognate with Tehom, the biblical primal waters, joining a fair list of connections between Babylonian and biblical mythologies. As an embodiment of chaos, she has, at various times, been associated with similar primordial chaos gods and monsters, especially those of the sea and or of dragon-like form, including the biblical Leviathan and the Norse Jormungandr. And, of course, within Dungeons & Dragons, she has become the popular five-headed queen of evil chromatic dragons. But I think that does her a little disservice. The Monster Manual 2 provides a list of the devils of the hells, and so I'll finish this video off by running down that list and, where possible, giving short summaries on each unique diabolic personage therein from a real-world, within inverted commas, perspective. For a game perspective, see my previous video on Hell, which references game materials where you might find out more information on these, including stat blocks. And so, from the top. Abigor. A demon able to tell the future and provide military advice. He usually appears as a handsome knight carrying a sceptre. Adonides is a demon named by Zacharias Visacomes, an authority on Catholic exorcism from the 16th century. While some of his demons have additional sources, some, like Adonides, are difficult to track down outside of Visacomes' list. Adramelech, a fallen angel, formerly a throne. His name means King of Fire, and he is ranked 8th of the 10 archdemons in certain demonologies. Ageres, another fallen angel, once a virtue, now a duke, and one of the 72 spirits of Solomon imprisoned in a brass vessel. Alastor, the chief executioner of hell, but also associated with the Greek god Zeus, as an alternative name for him when in avenger form, and a type of vengeance spirit. Within Greek tales, Alastor was the son of Neleus, who had his bride taken from him by her own father. She avenged herself by killing her brother and serving him to her father. As a form of spirit, Alastors have survived in mythology, demonology, spiritualism, and literature through Roman times, as mentioned by Cicero, into the modern era. Alcer, one of the 72 spirits of Solomon, a grand duke of hell that appears on horseback and possesses the head of a lion with flaming eyes. Amdusius, a duke of hell appearing in the form of a unicorn. He can summon music from nowhere and grant familiars to magicians. He is also one of the 72 spirits of Solomon. Ammon, a marquis of hell, often appearing with the head of a bird and probably a demonization of the Egyptian god Amun. As a devil, he holds the secrets to love and can see into the past and future. He is another of the 72 spirits of Solomon. Just as an aside, and because we've encountered a few so far, a little on these 72 spirits. These demons are listed in a source commonly known as the Lemegeton, which is associated with the biblical king Solomon. According to legend, Solomon captured these 72 demons in a brass vessel, which he then threw into a lake. Later, the Babylonians recovered the vessel and broke it open, releasing the demons back into the world. Glacia and Belial, from the Archdevil grouping of Dungeons & Dragons, are among the 72, and the Babylonians are supposed to have worshipped Belial as a god after releasing him from Solomon's vessel. Well, that's a very brief summary of that particular subject, so on with the list. Arioch, a fallen angel and a demon of vengeance. Beyond demonology, Arioch is portrayed as Michael Moorcock's works, especially those pertaining to Elric, as a principal lord of chaos. Baalberith, a fallen angel, or Baalberith, one of the Order of Cherubim, and now said to countersign diabolic pacts, and he keeps the archives of hell. He has the power to tempt humans into murder and blasphemy. Baal Figor and Baal Zephon, Balfigor is a fallen angel, as Belfigor, formerly a Moabite god of licentiousness, then categorized as a principality as an angel. He is now a demon of discovery and invention, and potentially associated with Priapus, in Numbers 25. Baalzephon is not... Well, I can't find a reference of him anywhere, but that Baal or Bel, we'll come across that when we come to Baal, and Bel in later things. But essentially, it is a reference to that. So it would be a Baal Zephon, whatever Zephon is meant to mean. Baal is the king of the eastern division of hell, and, with the Zohar, equated to the archangel Raphael, also an alternative name for Baal and Bel, which we'll come to in a bit. Balan, a fallen angel, also Balaam, formerly a domination, now a three-headed demon with the heads of a bull, a ram and a man, with a serpentine tail who rides a bear, another of the 72. Barbas, an alternate name for Marbas, a lion-like member of the 72 Solomonic demons. Barbatos, a fallen angel, formerly a virtue, now a duke of hell who can understand birds and can read both past and future. Perhaps no surprise that he is one of the 72 demons of the Legometon. Bathim, also known as Mathim or Marthim. Reginald Scott names this demon in his 1584 The Discoveries of Witchcraft. Bel, another name for Baal. Baal was a Semite fertility god, perhaps the male counterpart of Belet. The name has significance in etymology. For one, many of the devils in this list have Bel or Baal as a suffix or prefix, what we said about Baal-Zephon. Historical figures such as Hannibal are also connected to him. Hannibal's name means grace of Baal. Baal, who we mentioned earlier, may be an alternate name for Baal, used within the D&D list as a separate figure. And again, Bel is one of the 72. And Bele, perhaps another, coming from the root of Baal and Baal. Bensozia is a female demon whose temple was apparently discovered by Diploncé, probably a pagan deity with no association to the usual sources drawn from this list. Bethage and Biffant I can't find any direct sources for, but if you do find any sources and additional material on any of these, then please use the comments below to educate me. Bifrons, or Bifrons, an Earl of Hell that appears as a monster until command changes him otherwise. He can teach astrology and knowledge of magical herbs, stones and wood, another of the 72 demons of Solomon and one associated with necromancy. Bileth, a fallen angel, also named Beleth, once a power, now a king who rides a pale horse, and, of course, one of the 72. Bitru, an alternative name for Sertre, a member of the 72, appearing as an animal-headed winged human. His particular field is love and lust, and he is meant to be able to compel any woman to appear naked before someone that conjures him. Bur, probably Buher, one of the 10 Uthri who accompany the sun in Mandaean lore. He appears in the form of a starfish. Bune, the Duke of Hell, appears as a dragon with 3 heads, human, canine and eagle. He is one of the 72, and his general specialities are speech and wisdom. Carcrinalas is another name for Glasia labialis, or, to us running through D&D Devils, simply Glasia. Chamo, another demon listed by Zacharias Vysakomis, as is the next on our list, Cosby. Fekor, with Anarazel and Gaziel, is one of the trinity of demons that guard subterranean treasures. Fokala, a fallen angel, formerly a throne, the Duke of Hell presiding over sinking warships, and one of the 72. Furcus, or Forcas, a fallen angel, Duke of Hell, teacher of rhetoric, mathematics and logic. He can render a person invisible and locate lost property. He is also connected with chiromancy and pyromancy, and another member of the 72. Gaziel is possibly from Gazriel, a children's bedside amulet angel. Gope, a fallen angel, or Garp, once a power, now a prince and king of the south of hell, also known as Tap, and one of the 72. His speciality is in fomenting hate or love between parties, bestowing invisibility, teleportation, and telling the future. He is also a cardinal demon, and, along with Payman, one of the 2 kings of the West. cardinal demons in demonology rule the cardinal points, north, south, east and west. Although there was some disagreement in sources about which demons rule which cardinals, a generally accepted list has Uricus and Amaimon as kings of the east, Amaimon and Corson, or Gorson, as kings of the south, Paimon and Garp, or Gope, or Tap, as kings of the west, and Egin and Zinimar, or Zimimar, as kings of the north. For me, the cardinal demons represent the obsession of demonologists through the centuries in arranging angels, demons and occult figures from all manner of sources into lists. We've already been touched on the 72 Solomonic demons, but at least there's a story there to connect them. Variously, there are also Enochian demons, largely listed in the Book of Enoch, the Geomantic demons associated, as the name suggests, with geomancy, fallen angels, as we've seen, planetary demons associated with the planets, and so on. Gorson, another king of the south of hell, routed while under the command of Lucifer during the wars between angels. He's also a cardinal demon and one of the kings of the south. Herobal. I can't find this guy in any of my sources, but his root is obviously of the Baal or Bel form. Hero comes from the Greek heros, which means protector or defender, so Herobal translates into the protector of Baal or something like that. Herodias, another one of uncertain origin. The dias suffix of his name comes from the Greek dios, or Latin deus, meaning divine. Coupled with the prefix hero, the name translates to something along the lines of protector of the divine, or perhaps protector of God. Hutijin, again one I cannot find, but given the suffix jin, we have a possible signpost there to look at Sanskrit to work out the meaning of the name. Here, jin can mean victor or conqueror, while huti can mean invitation, calling or invoking. So hutijin could translate to invoked conqueror or invoker of the conqueror or something along those lines. Lilis is likely another alternate name for Lilith and very much drawn from the same Lilu root as Lilith, who we will discuss next. And Lilith, the first wife of Adam, bride of Satan, and enemy to infants. Lilith is influenced by the female Mesopotamian demons known as the Adat Lili. Lilith, some sources say, is the mother of Cain. She is said to go by at least 17 different names. The children of Adam and Lilith, in some sources, are the Linin, purportedly the first demons. But other sources state that Adam rejected Lilith, and thus they had no children together. Lilith is also one of the central characters in the mythology of the game Vampire the Masquerade. Macalis or Macal, potentially after Macal, an angel invoked during the exorcism of the bat. Malphas, also known as Malpas, another of the 72 Solomonic demons, said to take the form of a huge black bird. His speciality is building, and some legends tie him to Solomon's renown as a builder. Martinet. I can't find any reference to Martinet as a being, but as a definition the word references an individual who demands complete obedience and a multi-tailed scourge. Fitting for the constable of hell in D&D's take on the matter. Melkon, referred by Duplancy in his 1863 edition of the Dictionnaire Infernal as the demon who receives payment from public employees. That might explain why our local council is in such debt. Merodach, possibly after Merod, an angel whose invocation is within the greater key of Solomon, is also referenced by Zacharias Visacomes. Morax, also known as Forfax or Forai, an earl in hell and provider of skill in astronomy and the liberal arts. As with many on the list, he is one of the 72 and he appears as a minotaur. Naomi, or Naomi with an I rather than an E, appears in the Bible as the wife of Elimelech. She is the mother-in-law of Ruth and, as some commentators would have it, instigates Ruth's seduction of Boaz. Perhaps the authors of D&D's Hell, primarily, I believe, Gary Gygax and Ed Greenwood, believed the consort of the seducing Belial would suit such a figure. Neabaz, possibly Nibhaz, a deity of the Avim, possibly of canine form and perhaps linked to the Egyptian god Anubis. Nexroth, another demon listed by Zacharias Visacomes. Fongor, likely to be Fogor, one of the demons referenced by Zacharias Visacomes. For the record, I believe this to be the funniest name in Dungeons & Dragons' Diabolic Parade. Rimmon, a fallen angel, originally an Aramaean deity of Damascus, an Akkadian and Assyrian storm god, and a Babylonian thunder god. In hell, he is the ambassador of the devil to Russia. In some sources, for example Diploncé, Rimmon is a physician of hell, a doctor where no healing is ever sought. The name is potentially a corruption of Araman. Tartak, possibly Tartarchus, or at least with some connection to Tartarus, or even being Tartarus, the angelic chief of hell, which presides over the punishments of those unfortunates whose souls have found their way there. Titivilus. You might find this one funny, but it's still fungal for me. Titivilus first shows up in Tractatus de Penitentia by John of Wales, around 1285. He is variously described as a demon who introduces errors into the works of scribes, a collector of idle banter during church services, and errors in the words used during services, including mispronunciations, which, given how many of the names I've probably butchered in this video essay alone, has given him plenty of work. All of these he gathers to add to the evidence against someone when determining whether heaven or hell, and which hell, at that, they are to end up in. Zabos is a count of hell who uses a crocodile as a mount. Zagam, also Zagam and Zagan, one of the 72 spirits of Solomon, appearing as a winged bull. He is a master of alchemy, able to turn water into wine and wine into blood. Zapan, I have no idea on this one. Possibly another variant of Zagan, Zagam, Zagam and all of that. Zipar, another of the 72, a soldier demon with the power to make a woman fall in love with a man, as indicated by a magician that invokes him. In some sources, he can also make women barren. Zimamar, according to Reginald Scott, a cardinal demon and king of the north, and that is it. Our delve into the diabolic personages referenced in Dungeons & Dragons in the game's Structure of the Nine Hells. If you found this video essay interesting, then please let me know. A similar look into demons and other supernatural entities that cross over into the game from the occult influences potentially awaits. Until next time, take care.